Hey everyone, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema. So we are almost at the end of 2022, and I gotta say, it's, for me, just myself personally, I know we often complain a lot about the state of movies, but I would say overall this has been a pretty decent year for movies. There have been just as, if not more, really great films that I saw last year, so, I'm satisfied. But at the same time, there have also been a lot of movies that have really made me question my sanity, question the state of movies where they are today, so I thought it'd just be a fun thing to, in addition to the best of the year video that I'm going to be coming out with pretty soon, also do a top 10 worst of the year video. And I hesitated to make this video first because I understand from experience that I've had in the past and just from, being as in love with film as I am, just how hard filmmaking is. And I know that even on bad movies, it's always an achievement to make them, even if the product doesn't turn out great. But at the same time, I mean, there are real criticisms to be made on the state of movies right now, and I think that it'd be a little bit cathartic and definitely fun for me to just sort of tee off on the movies that I personally hated watching the most this year. One disclaimer that I want to say is that most of my top 10 movies I'm pretty sure made a lot of money at the box office. There are a couple that didn't, but most of them were actually pretty successful, so I don't really feel like I'm going after too many small targets here. As far as the movies I'm going to be talking about, I have reviewed a couple of them, but most of them I actually have not reviewed yet, and I think a lot of that is just, I don't know, sometimes when a movie will come out and I really hate it, I don't necessarily have the energy to talk about it. I'd rather talk about something that A, I either really loved, or B, something that I maybe liked aspects of, but I have certain criticisms here and there. It's not always just the most fun. It can get a little bit repetitive to just hate on something all the time, so that's why I think it'd be a good idea to sort of save this for an end of the year thing and can catch up a little bit. And unlike my best of the year video, where I'm going to be having a bunch of honorable mentions of stuff that I really liked but I couldn't quite fit on the list, I'm not going to be doing like a dishonorable mentions here. I'm just going to be doing 10 movies. So without further ado, let's just get into it, shall we? So my number 10 worst movie of the year is Bullet Train. This is a movie that I caught up with fairly recently. I did not see it in theaters because there were aspects of the trailer that kind of intrigued me. I definitely would have liked to see a summer blockbuster like that, but the trailer just gave me really like shitty Tarantino knockoff vibes, and so I was like, I'll wait for it to come to streaming. And then when I finally watched it on streaming, that's exactly what it ended up being, so looks like I saved my money. What really shocked me about this was like how much Brad Pitt was sort of possessed by Ryan Reynolds in a lot of ways. It's like he's a real movie star with a lot of charisma, and in movies like, anything he does with Tarantino in particular, he always comes off with a lot of like real charm, real humor. But in this, everything he did was just so, yeah, like I said, it was like he was possessed by Ryan Reynolds and the Deadpool script writers. Every time he said like shitballs or fuck nuts, I just like couldn't help but just like cringe and roll my eyes. Not that I don't like vulgar humor, but like you have to be at least a little bit creative about it, and this was nowhere close to that. This movie just leaned way too hard into sort of like meme-obsessed self-awareness, where nothing about the action movie aspects of it worked at all. I never felt tension, I never felt emotional weight for these characters, and as far as even the special effects goes, I was super disappointed. I thought the CG was awful, especially in the sort of climax set piece, so yeah, very disappointing for me, but I'm glad I didn't go see it in theaters. My number 9 is Firestarter, the remake, I guess. It's an adaptation of the Stephen King novel, but it's, after we had a previous Firestarter movie in the 80s. I think I was really confused when I saw this movie coming out. I remember I saw the trailer for the first time when I went to go see X with my friend Gelsey, and we both lost our shit as soon as the little girl said "liar, liar, pants on fire" in the trailer. And I honestly kind of watched this movie just to see if that line was in the movie or if that was just in the trailer. It's in the movie. But honestly, some of that cringy dialogue is far from the biggest issues this movie has. It's really boring. Despite being a half hour shorter than the 1980s version, you never get a sense that actually helps the pacing at all. It's still quite a bit of a slog. It takes a Stephen King story that is maybe not one of his better ones, but definitely has interesting ideas, kind of like Carrie, about sort of the power that these people have, the sort of pyrokineticists. And yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of interesting psychology that you could get into with those characters. And this movie just really kind of watered that down. I never felt interested in sort of the broader psychology of them because of something that the movie gave me. The only good thing I can say about this movie is that John Carpenter did the score, and he, it still kind of slaps. It's definitely, but it is, even for him, it's definitely like a B-side. I mean, I think I would rather listen to the scores he did for the new Halloween movies and stuff like that. So yeah, really not much to say about this one. At number 8, it's Morbid time. I don't want to spend too much time on this one. One, because I've already reviewed it, and two, I feel like this movie has been like memed to death, talked to death in this year. But yeah, I mean, like, for me, I definitely went into it with a little bit of optimism, hoping that this would be like sort of a throwback to kind of, superhero movies that weren't reaching for as much, that were just comfortable being little pulpy action movies. And that's not what it is at all. It's extremely derivative and boring. If you think that in between all of the really boring exposition, there's going to be some fun, creative action set pieces, none of that is to be found here. The action is dog shit. It just looks like somebody just completely shuck up the camera and then added in a few CG effects. So yeah, can't recommend it. The end credits of that movie scared the shit out of me, just in the sense of they're implying that we're gonna get a lot more of this in the future, with like Morbius teaming up with Venom and Vulture in a fucking new Spider-Man movie. It's just like, please stop. Please. So even though I hated Morbius just like most people did, I did not hate it as much as another movie that Marvel released this year. My number 7 is Thor: Love and Thunder. Now I will say, just from like a script point of view and, like structuring a movie, just putting in the basic aspects needed to make it work, yeah, Thor 4 probably is better than Morbius, but it annoyed me way more than Morbius did. After Thor Ragnarok, with the success of that, it was clear that they were going to invite Taika Waititi back to make another Thor movie. It seems like he didn't want to do that, and so when he came back to do it, he kind of tried to troll them, go a little bit Gremlins 2, just make the movie kind of a bunch of jokes. But then the studio came in and they were like, no, you have to put all of this other shit in the movie. And so it's this tonally inconsistent mess where very few of the jokes hit because the director doesn't even really seem to care about that. The screaming goats were just embarrassing. This has some of the worst CG I've ever seen in a Marvel movie, which is really saying a lot. Yeah, and because of the total inconsistencies of it, just none of what should work about an action superhero movie ended up working for me at all. The only part I liked about this movie is where Russell Crowe plays Zeus and he starts announcing the plans for the new orgy. My man Russell, you still got it, but other than that, this is one of the movies that annoyed me the most this year. At number 6, I have a movie that if any of you guys have seen it, 1, I'm kind of impressed, and 2, if you have seen it, you're probably wondering why I don't have it lower than 6. The reason I don't have it lower is just because the next 5 kind of pissed me off a little bit more, but just in terms of filmmaking, this is probably the worst movie I've seen this year, Marmaduke. This is an animated movie about Marmaduke the dog, who I gather is some sort of comic book or like cartoon character. And there was a previous Marmaduke movie that came out like, I want to say like 10 years ago, that was actually live action. And as horrible of an idea as that sounds, I guarantee you the result is not worse than what this Netflix animated Marmaduke movie is. This is some of the worst animation I've ever seen in my life. I cannot believe that this was released. You can still watch this on Netflix. This is a real movie. But worse than that, I mean, this is an animated movie that just has nothing to offer kids in terms of like, 1, entertainment, but 2, like any kind of message that would be good for kids to learn. I mean, the only message I could glean out of this is that it's a bad idea to train your dogs, which is really fucking stupid. I think I said in my review that if I had kids, I would rather show them the Texas Chainsaw Massacre than this movie, because at least if they watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at an impressionable age, they might grow up to be Julia Ducournau or something like that. But yeah, this movie, do not show it to your kids. Do not show it to anyone. Just avoid it, please. There is one thing I did enjoy about it though, and back before I just went to using full stars, back when I did half stars, the reason I didn't half star this was because right at the end, there's a scene where they basically pretend that they fucking killed Marmaduke, this like child animated dog, and I was like, holy fucking shit, they actually just murdered him before the end of the movie, and they're gonna fade to credits. It's a fake out, but it's fucking hilarious. I lost my shit so hard when that happened that I was like, okay, just give it anything that's not the 1 star, but really this is a 1-star movie, especially now that I'm just using full stars. Just like, need to get it out of my memory. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, the movie also is voiced, Marmaduke the dog is voiced by Pete Davidson. So, yeah. Number 5, another movie I have also reviewed on this channel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. So I stand by everything I said in my review. This is a really awful horror movie, just in terms of like, creating any kind of sense of fear, especially the way that the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre does. There's none of that here. But really what pissed me off even more was just like the clumsy political messages and all this, and this like social media commentary, all this weird shit that they tried to put in that a lot of people like almost view as like a so bad it's good aspect of the movie that kind of brings them enjoyment, but for me, I don't know, I just found it really unbearable. And when I first watched the movie, I'd only seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've since gone back and watched a bunch of the other sequels, Texas Chainsaw 2, the 2003 film, and even Texas Chainsaw 3D, which is probably one of the most hated in the franchise for sure. I hate the 2022 film more than Texas Chainsaw 3D. I know that might be controversial, but at least that's it. Texas 3D is an awful movie with awful effects, but it did not annoy me nearly as much as watching this Netflix film. Number 4, the most recent film on this list, just in terms of when I watched it, I actually just caught up with this last night. Moonfall. When this came out back in January, February, it flopped harder than almost any movie in history. I think it had a $140 million budget, and it was independently financed, but it made about $40 million, so it's gotta be one of the least successful independent movies ever made. Although I have seen it on airplanes a bunch, so maybe it's starting to make its money back a little bit more. And people who reviewed it negatively mostly talked about just how stupid the science was of it, and how none of this makes any sense. And I can understand the argument of somebody watching this and just going like, well, it's a Roland Emmerich movie, you're not supposed to take the science seriously, you're just supposed to turn your brain off, whatever. But the problem is that the movie doesn't even work in that way. From start to finish, this is one of the most visually uninspired movies I've ever seen. From the first scene, they have you in space with them, and I'm not expecting like Ad Astra space cinematography, but this just looked like a Marvel movie. It was just like the really overlit green screen backdrop that just made me nauseous. And it was just all the more surprising, you know, one, given that this movie was independently financed by Roland Emmerich, who, you know, is somebody who posits himself as somebody who makes like one of the last bastions of original blockbusters. And there's nothing original about this. Everything about this movie is just him cannibalizing his own career. If you want to get an idea for how uninspired the direction is in this movie, just look at the performances from Halle Berry and from Patrick Wilson, who have, you know, Patrick Wilson's been in stuff like Aquaman, where he actually has a lot of charisma in these sort of big blockbuster kind of roles. And yeah, there's none of that here. I never thought I would look back on 2012, the movie 2012 by Roland Emmerich, and be like, wow, those were the days when he made movies. Number 3 is Pinocchio. No, not the Guillermo del Toro film, which maybe I'll review at some point. I have mixed feelings about it, but I liked it overall. It is leagues better than Disney's pile of shit that they just released a couple of months ago. This follows Disney's trend, kind of like the live-action Lion King, of doing more or less a shot-for-shot remake in just a live-action format of all of their products. And that's exactly what this comes off as, is just a product. There's nothing about this that says that Robert Zemeckis had some sort of artistic vision, some reason why he wanted to put his spin on the Pinocchio story. This is just a cash grab. Yeah, I don't have too much to say about this, because how much can you really say about something that is a soulless shot-for-shot remake of the original, other than that it's a soulless shot-for-shot remake of the original? So, I mean, I would just suggest, just go watch the Del Toro version, watch the original. The original's great. Number 2, we're getting into the heavy hitters here. So, I mentioned, I think, Thor: Love and Thunder as a movie that maybe annoyed me more than anything else, but I think if I had to choose whether to watch either Thor: Love and Thunder or Spirited again, would probably pick Thor: Love and Thunder. Spirited was made in a lab to annoy me. This is a musical. It's sort of an adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. which itself has been adapted into much better versions of plays and you could even say movies, etc. But this is, yeah, it's a musical version of this on Apple TV Plus, starring Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell's hit or miss with me. There's movies like The Other Guys that he's in that I really love, but there's also stuff that he's made where he's just completely insufferable. And Ryan Reynolds is mostly just completely insufferable. I mean, the two biggest things I can say about this is, one, it looks like shit. Like, you know, just like a lot of these movies, it's way overlit. It's just, it doesn't look like a movie. It looks like some weird, like, it looks like a commercial, to be honest. It doesn't even look like a TV show. And the other thing is that the music sucks. And I'm actually a big fan of, like, you know, musical adaptations of A Christmas Carol. Fun fact, when I was a little kid, I was actually in a bunch of those myself, so, you know, this is something that could have been up my alley, but just the execution of it, like I said, it was made in a lab to annoy me. But, you know, I think I said in my review, like for me personally, if I go to hell, there is a room in hell specially made for me that will have Spirited on loop on a double bill with Deadpool 2 for the rest of eternity, and I will suffer. Number 1. The worst movie I've seen this year, the most uninspiring thing I've seen this year, the thing that pissed me off the most, was actually something that I think a lot of people were kind of like just meh on, but I absolutely fucking hated The Gray Man. And I think what I hated about this the most was actually the Russo brothers' comments that they made kind of when they were doing press for the film. They had made a statement basically saying that going to theaters, like, or just the expectation that theaters are like this holy place for movies is elitist because you know, theaters have gotten so expensive, etc. For one, this isn't really true. If you account for inflation, you know, the prices of going to a movie are actually holding somewhat steady over the last 10 years or so. But let's say they're right, because I mean, a lot of people probably just think that they are right. I mean, if you go to the movies, it does seem really expensive. Why is that? Could it have something to do with the fact that a certain production company has basically monopolized movie theaters for the past, you know, 10 years? And because of that monopolization, the movie theater experience for a lot of people has become something that's much more akin to theme park rides. And I wonder which filmmakers might have something to do with that. Could it be a couple of brothers that maybe contributed to a couple of movies from this production company? I don't know. It's a mystery. Fuck out of here with that nonsense. Movie theaters are struggling a lot as it is, and we do not need people who are some of the highest grossing filmmakers in the industry talking shit about movie theaters. So that's one reason it pissed me off. But the other reason is just when I watched the film itself, it was just unbelievable how little whoever made it seemed to care about any of it. For a couple of directors who are making this, like, you know, espionage spy thriller, they seem to have very little, you know, flair for their genre references. There's nothing engaging about this. I never once really knew or frankly cared why people are chasing this guy. And yeah, I mean, there's just no emotional tension or weight for me through the entirety of the runtime. And I could have maybe dealt with that a little bit if the action were at least competent, but oh my god, like, I prefer the Russo brothers sequences that they did in, like, Endgame compared to this. And then, you know, if you know, like, if you know anything about how I view action, like, that's saying a lot. This is a spy thriller, which doesn't have anything to do with superheroes, doesn't have anything to do with, like, crazy powers or whatever, yet there's all this, like, CGI magic, like, every time there's a fighting sequence. This stars 3 actors I really like, you know, Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas. They are just completely stale here. The title The Gray Man is apt because that's kind of like the energy that you get out of these characters. It's just kind of a gray void of nothing. But the worst aspect of this is that this script, one, it's a decent kind of espionage thriller idea, but originally this was set to be directed by James Gray, who is not only one of my favorite directors, but his last name is, of course, Gray. So we were robbed of both a great film and a great pun. So yeah, I think The Gray Man for me, both from just coming from the director's comments, like just the mindset about movies that these guys clearly have, and, you know, looking at the product that they created, I think The Gray Man represents just the exact everything I don't like about the way the state movies are in today. So yeah, that's my top 10 worst of the year. Thank you guys for being here, for being my therapy, my opportunity to rant about this stuff. I really appreciate it, and I hope you got some kind of enjoyment out of it as well. If you like this video, you can please definitely like it down below and subscribe to the channel if you want. I've got more videos soon. I should be putting out my best of the year video here pretty soon. I'm much more excited to make that. And I should put a lot more thought into it, to be honest, than I do for the worst movies. But yeah, just stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.